In the quiet of the night, as you settle into rest, imagine drifting back through the long corridors of time, where the story of Earth unfolded in slow and wondrous ways. The air around you now feels gentle, carrying the familiar blend of gases that has sustained your every breath since the moment you first opened your eyes. Yet once, long ago, the very air of this planet was different, thicker, richer, more abundant in ways that shaped life into forms both immense and extraordinary. There was a time when oxygen, the very element we rely on with each calm inhale, filled the atmosphere, not in the amounts you know today, but in far greater measure. Imagine a world where oxygen did not linger at just a fifth of the air, but swelled to nearly 35%. A world where every breath was saturated with vitality, where the pulse of existence moved in rhythm, with an atmosphere charged with energy. It is within this gentle imagining that we begin our journey, moving softly through the eons, listening to the whispered history of oxygen, and what it did to life when its presence on Earth rose to such extraordinary heights. The story is one of transformation, of flourishing forests and colossal insects, of fires that danced with intensity, and of lives that were cradled in the richness of a world unlike our own. As you listen, allow your thoughts to flow as freely as the air itself, easing into the rhythm of a narration that carries no urgency, no demand, but simply an invitation to drift deeper into calm reflection. Long before Earth became a place of forests, animals, or people, it was a world of gases, minerals, and slow chemical awakenings. In its earliest ages, oxygen was scarcely present at all, bound tightly within rocks and oceans, hidden away like a secret yet to be shared. For nearly 2 billion years, the skies were quiet of oxygen, and life itself was simple, microbial, and unassuming. But then, in a slow unfolding that spanned unfathomable time, photosynthetic organisms, tiny cyanobacteria, began, releasing oxygen as a byproduct of their humble work beneath ancient seas. This event, known in scientific memory as the Great Oxidation, was not a moment but an era when oxygen began seeping into the atmosphere, slowly, gently, until the very fabric of the planet was altered forever. Imagine the still waters of those ancient oceans, tinted green with microbial mats, each one a tiny engine of change. Bubbles of oxygen rose from them, invisible yet powerful, accumulating over ages. At first, the oxygen bound itself to iron dissolved in seawater, forming vast beds of rusted minerals that still lie hidden beneath our feet. Only when the iron was saturated did the oxygen truly begin to accumulate in the open sky. It was the beginning of a long relationship between oxygen and life, one that would weave itself through every breath of the future. By the time forests stretched across the continents hundreds of millions of years later, the stage was set for oxygen's great rise. During the Carboniferous period, roughly 300 million years ago, Earth's atmosphere reached its remarkable peak, with oxygen levels swelling to about 35% of the air. To put this into a softer perspective, imagine yourself breathing now. The air you draw in is about 21% oxygen. In those ancient times, each breath would have held far more. The air itself would have felt different, more supportive of life's fire, more nurturing to the rhythm of existence. Forests of towering ferns and ancient trees covered the land. These were not forests as we know them today, with flowering plants and familiar leaves, but primordial jungles of spore-bearing plants, club mosses, and horsetails that reached heights of 30 meters or more. Beneath their canopies, the ground was thick with dampness, shadowed and rich with decay. As these vast forests grew, their dense plant life drew in carbon dioxide and released oxygen, feeding the very atmosphere in a cycle that seemed endless. Now imagine how life responded to this gift. With so much oxygen filling the air, the limits of size and energy were altered. Insects, which today are bound by the delicate efficiency of their breathing systems, grew to astonishing proportions. Dragonflies, instead of the fragile winged beings we know, spread wings that stretched nearly 3 feet across. Millipedes longer than a human arm wandered through the undergrowth, their many legs tapping softly against the damp earth. Spiders and scorpions reached sizes that would seem otherworldly to us. Yet to them, it was the natural consequence of a world where oxygen allowed every cell to breathe more freely. And as you picture these gentle giants of the insect world, allow your mind to soften into the vastness of time, where the slow ticking of ages made no haste. The world then was not hurried. It was a steady unfolding, an era where forests breathed with abundance, and life expanded into forms that today feel like dreams whispered by the earth itself. The elevated oxygen not only allowed such creatures to grow, but sustained vast ecosystems, where the energy of breathing was no longer a limiting force but a generous gift. Fires, too, were different in that oxygen-rich world, where today a spark might fade without fuel. Then, fire could ignite more easily, spreading quickly through the dry forests. Yet even fire was part of the balance, shaping landscapes, renewing growth, and returning nutrients to the soil. In this way, oxygen was both a giver and a sculptor, nurturing life while also setting its boundaries through flame. Asterisk, as you listen, allow the thought of those ancient forests to become like a landscape in your imagination. Picture the air heavy with moisture, the trees towering, the dragonflies gliding with effortless grace, their wings catching the filtered light. The hum of insects fills the air, amplified by their size, yet softened by distance. Everything feels larger, slower, deeply connected. It was a world where the simple act of breathing was transformed into a force that shaped evolution itself. The creatures of that time were in quiet dialogue with oxygen, their bodies adapting in ways that seem remarkable to us now. Amphibians, too, flourished in those swamps, growing larger and more diverse. The richness of the air gave them strength, while the lush landscapes provided endless habitats. Life was experimenting, expanding, filling every corner with new forms, each one finding its place in the oxygen-saturated world. And yet, nothing on Earth is forever fixed. Oxygen, like all things, rose and fell with the rhythms of time. The Carboniferous peak was followed by changes in climate, in vegetation, and in the balance of gases. As vast forests died and decayed, and as geological forces shifted, oxygen levels began to decline. The world of giant insects slowly faded, giving way to new eras where different creatures would rise, each one shaped by the air that surrounded them. But even as oxygen diminished, its mark remained forever etched into the story of life. For in that period of abundance, evolution had tasted what was possible. Larger bodies, greater energy, and more complex ecosystems had been made real. The memory of 35% oxygen lingered in the DNA of life, in the resilience of species, and in the enduring diversity that followed. Asterisk now, as you lie here listening, your own breath is steady, quiet, drawing in the 21% oxygen of today's air. It is enough to sustain you, enough to keep your heart beating, your mind gently wandering through these stories of the past. And yet, there is a comfort in knowing that this simple act of breathing connects you to that ancient world. The oxygen in your lungs tonight may carry atoms once exhaled by a dragonfly of the Carboniferous, or once released by the fern forests that towered long before humanity ever dreamed. In this way, time is folded, seamless, unbroken, linking you to the great history of air and life. The story of oxygen is not one of urgency, but of patience. Its rise and fall took millions of years, shaping worlds and lives at a pace so gentle it mirrors the very rhythm of your breath. And as you listen, you may feel your own breathing align with that ancient flow, slow and calm, as though your body remembers the timeless dialogue between air and life. In the chapters yet to come, we will drift further into these transformations, exploring how oxygen not only built forests and insects, but also influenced the very evolution of vertebrates, paving the way for creatures that would walk, run, and eventually dream beneath the sky. But for now, allow yourself to rest in the vision of that rich world, filled with the whisper of giant wings, the rustle of ancient ferns, and the quiet power of 35% oxygen wrapping the earth in abundance. In this vision of the past, the Carboniferous forests stretch endlessly. Imagine walking slowly across a soft forest floor, where each step sinks into a thick bed of fallen fronds and moss. The air is heavy with oxygen and moisture, a warm mist clinging to your skin. Giant horsetails rise like pillars, their segmented stalks reaching upwards, crowned with delicate fronds that sway gently even in the faintest breeze. These forests are hushed but alive, every corner humming with creatures drawn from a time when air itself was a fountain of possibility. Overhead, dragonflies circle slowly, their wings translucent, etched like stained glass, with a wingspan wider than your outstretched arms. They hover gracefully, adjusting with the ease of a being perfectly suited to its oxygen-rich environment. Beneath them, Massive millipedes crawl, their many legs moving in rippling unison. The ground trembles softly under their weight, though they move without haste, patient and ancient, as if time itself bends around them. The creatures of this world lived within a delicate balance. Their very size was possible only because of the richness of oxygen. Insects, unlike mammals or birds, do not breathe with lungs but through networks of tiny tubes that carry air directly to their cells. In today's air, those tubes limit their growth, but in the Carboniferous, the high concentration of oxygen allowed them to expand, to thrive, to grow into giants. It is as though the world gave them a gift, and they unfolded into it fully. Amphibians of the age, too, were transformed by this atmosphere. Some grew to lengths of several meters, moving sluggishly through the swamps with wide, patient eyes. They lingered at the edges of still waters, their calls deep and resonant, echoing softly through the mist. The abundance of oxygen nourished them, gave their muscles power, allowed them to explore both land and water with ease. In those ancient wetlands, life breathed in deeply, filling lungs, filling tissues, filling existence itself with the energy of the sky. Fires, though destructive in appearance, played a gentle role in shaping the land. Imagine the sudden spark of a lightning strike in a dry season. Within moments, flames spread, fueled by the oxygen-rich air. The blaze roared higher, faster, brighter than those of today. But as quickly as it consumed, it cleared space for new growth, for the cycle of life to begin anew. Oxygen was not only a gift of size and strength, but also a force of renewal, ensuring that life never stagnated, always evolving, always shifting into new forms. For millions of years, this balance endured. Oxygen levels remained high, supporting ecosystems of remarkable vitality. Yet the Earth is ever-changing, and oxygen's abundance was tied to the great forests themselves. As plants died and were buried in the swamps, their remains compressed into layers of coal, locking away carbon and leaving oxygen free in the air. But when climates shifted, when seas rose and fell, when continents drifted, these processes changed. Oxygen levels began their slow decline, and with it, the world of giants faded into memory. Still, the story of high oxygen had already written itself into the narrative of evolution. The creatures that survived carried forward the resilience of their ancestors. Reptiles emerged, adapting to drier conditions, carrying the breath of oxygen into new environments. Insects, though smaller, remained diverse and enduring. The forests evolved, too, giving rise to new forms of plants, each one a chapter in the quiet dialogue between air and life. When you close your eyes and imagine this era, you may feel the closeness of its breath. The Earth of 300 million years ago is gone, yet its echoes remain. The oxygen you breathe tonight may carry atoms recycled countless times since then. Atoms once inhaled by dragonflies, exhaled by amphibians, consumed in ancient flames. The air has never truly left us. It has simply shifted, cycled, transformed. In this way, time is not a wall but a circle, where everything returns, softened and reshaped. Consider, too, the way oxygen influences not only size and energy, but the very spark of consciousness. In your own body, oxygen is drawn into lungs, carried in red blood cells, delivered to tissues where it fuels the quiet fire of metabolism. Every thought you have, every dream, every memory drifting through your mind tonight, is powered by oxygen. Without it, the dance of neurons, the pulse of your heart, the rhythm of your breath would cease. You are, in a way, a child of oxygen, as much as the dragonflies and forests of the Carboniferous ever were. Now, as we drift deeper into this narration, let us move slowly through the layers of time, pausing in each moment to breathe alongside the world as it once was. Feel the richness of that ancient air, the weight of it, the generosity of it. Let the images of towering forests and enormous insects linger like dreams behind your eyelids. Let the calm realization settle within you that the earth has always been a place of change, of balance, of quiet wonder, and that your presence here, tonight, breathing steadily, is part of that endless continuum. The story of oxygen's rise to 35% is also a story of life's courage to adapt. For just as life thrived in its abundance, it endured its decline. When the great forests fell, when oxygen waned, creatures shifted, finding new ways to exist. This resilience is woven into all life, into you as well. As you listen, as you rest, Know that the same earth which carried dragonflies with wings like kites now carries you, and the same oxygen that once filled their cells now fills yours. And so, the rhythm of this history is the rhythm of your breath. In, out, steady.com, a slow unfolding across time. Each inhalation connects you to the richness of the past. Each exhalation releases you into the quiet of the present. You are not separate from the story of oxygen, but part of it, a living continuation of its gift. Now, let the images grow softer. The forests fade into mist. The insects drift away on wide wings. The fires burn down into embers. What remains is the gentle awareness of time's vastness and your place within it. The earth breathes, you breathe, and together the story continues. As the Carboniferous forests breathed, they became architects of the very atmosphere that sustained them. Each towering tree and every delicate fern exhaled oxygen into the skies, weaving an invisible fabric that connected earth and air, leaf and breath, creature and flame. It is a quiet mystery to imagine. The very plants that once shaded shallow swamps also sculpted the conditions for creatures to grow vast, for ecosystems to expand, for life itself to flourish with an intensity unmatched in most ages since. Walking through this ancient world in your imagination, notice how the air feels different, denser, richer, almost sweet. Each breath you take in this vision carries more than today's air, filling your chest with a slow, calming fullness. Even as you imagine it, your own breathing begins to mirror the rhythm of that deep time. Slower, steadier, as though aligning with the pulse of a world gone by. The creatures of this era were shaped not just by chance, but by the opportunities that abundant oxygen offered. With so much available energy, insects expanded into forms that feel almost mythical when compared to those you know today. Picture a dragonfly resting on a reed by the edge of a swampy pool. Its body is long, gleaming, with iridescent greens and blues, wings catching the filtered light as they stretch wide. A single beat of its wings fills the air with a gentle thrumming sound, not loud, but present, like a soft heartbeat of the forest. Nearby, a millipede, as long as a person moves slowly, carefully, its segmented body curling slightly as it explores the damp forest floor. Each leg lifts and falls with quiet precision, a ripple of motion across its armored length. To us it may seem alien, but in this world, it is perfectly ordinary. The creature is at home, breathing air that allows it to grow beyond the limits of our imagination. Other insects join the Syngian scorpions, their pincers clacking softly as they move through ferns, and beetles the size of birds, their shells gleaming like polished stone. They too are children of the air, made possible by the sky's generosity. And though they may seem imposing, the forest holds a calmness, a balance that makes them simply part of the whole. They are not intruders, not monsters, but threads in the vast tapestry of life, each one breathing the same enriched atmosphere that now flows in your own imagination. The amphibians of the Carboniferous also tell a story of transformation. Some resemble giant salamanders, their smooth, damp skin glistening in the dappled light. They lounge at the edges of pools, eyes half-lidded, bodies still but powerful. With the gift of oxygen, their muscles hold more strength, their lungs more endurance. They rise occasionally, slipping into the water with a muted splash, creating ripples that spread slowly outward, merging with the calm surface until all is still once more. Their presence is unhurried, peaceful, as though time itself is stretched long in their company. Life in this world was both abundant and fragile. The forests that created so much oxygen also depended on the right conditions to thrive. In wetter times, growth was lush and unbroken. In drier seasons, fires became common, fueled by oxygen that made flames burn hotter, faster, more intense. To imagine such fires is not to see destruction, but transformation. Flames sweeping through the undergrowth cleared space, allowing new growth to return. Charcoal deposits buried in the rock record show us that fire was a frequent guest of these ancient landscapes. It was a cycle, a rhythm, much like breathing itself. Growth, fire, renewal, balance. Close your eyes for a moment and think of that. Rhythm, growth like an inhale, flames like an exhale, renewal as the pause in between. Even in fire, the forest found continuity, a way to keep time moving forward. And as you rest, as you listen, your own breathing aligns with this ancient cycle, slow and effortless. In, out, growth, release, renewal. You, too, are part of that great rhythm, connected across millions of years. Oxygen's abundance left signatures not only in the size of creatures, but in the rocks themselves. Layers of coal buried deep in the earth are remnants of forests that grew under skies heavy with oxygen. Each piece of coal is a time capsule, a fragment of the world that once was, compressed into quiet blackness. The fires of modern industry may unlock their energy, but the story behind them is older and gentler, a memory of vast wetlands, endless greenery, and skies thick with breath. As oxygen declined after the Carboniferous, life shifted. The giant insects disappeared, their size no longer sustainable. Amphibians yielded ground to reptiles, whose sturdier bodies and tougher eggs allowed them to wander farther from water. The earth changed, yet life endured. The oxygen-rich world had passed, but its legacy remained in the creatures that followed, in the fossils that lie hidden, and in the breath you take tonight. There is comfort in this continuity. The air that fills your lungs has traveled across ages, shared by beings long gone, yet never lost. Each atom of oxygen you breathe may once have passed through the tissues of a dragonfly, the leaves of a giant fern, or the lungs of an ancient amphibian. In this way, breathing is communion, a joining of past and present, life and memory. You and the earth itself, drifting deeper into this reflection, you may notice how the mind softens when it touches the vastness of time. The world of today feels smaller, quieter, like a single chapter in a much longer book. And yet, that chapter is no less important. Just as the dragonfly once ruled the air and the amphibian once ruled the swamp, you too are part of this unfolding story. You are a witness to a different era, one shaped by oxygen levels suited to your own body, your own breath, your own consciousness. And so we return to the gentle truth that oxygen is not just a gas, not just an element, but a bridge across time. It links forests of the past with cities of the present, dragonflies with dreamers, fire with renewal, breath with life. To rest in that truth is to rest in the embrace of the earth itself, to feel held by the same forces that shaped every creature before you. As this first part of the story softens, imagine the forests fading into twilight. The giant insects fold their wings and rest. The amphibians retreat into calm pools. The air, still heavy with oxygen, grows cooler, quieter. You stand at the edge of the swamp, breathing slowly, watching mist rise and drift between the trees. There is no urgency, no noise, only stillness, only continuity. The earth breathes, you breathe, and in that shared rhythm, you are at peace. The forests of the Carboniferous had whispered their secrets, but the story of oxygen did not end when the towering ferns and giant insects began to wane. As the earth moved into new ages, the composition of the air shifted. Levels of oxygen, once so high, began to settle downward, altering the rhythm of life, reshaping the possibilities of what could grow and what could no longer endure. It is a strange comfort to think that even something invisible, like the air itself, can steer the path of history. We often imagine history as battles, migrations, or inventions, but there is a deeper layer, a quieter guidance, in the way molecules in the atmosphere whisper instructions to every living thing. The amount of oxygen in the air is like the tempo of a song, setting the pace for the growth of forests, the size of creatures, the way life itself finds balance. As oxygen gradually declined from its peak, the giants of the Carboniferous slipped into memory. The vast dragonflies no longer soared through the skies, their wings replaced by smaller cousins that could survive in thinner air. The giant millipedes, once as long as a human, dwindled to smaller forms. They are still with us in miniature, crawling quietly beneath logs, reminders of a time when their ancestors could stretch across the forest floor like moving rivers of segments. And yet, with each ending came a new beginning. Lower oxygen levels reduced the vulnerability of the world to wildfires, creating more stable ecosystems where reptiles could thrive. Reptiles, with their dry, leathery eggs, could venture farther from the water, colonizing land with greater freedom than amphibians ever could. They were pioneers of a new balance, and in their quiet persistence, they set the stage for the age of dinosaurs. Imagine for a moment one of those early reptiles, small by comparison to what would later emerge, scuttling across a rocky landscape. Its body is low to the ground, scales glistening faintly in the sun. Its breath is steady, its movements cautious but sure. Each inhale draws oxygen into lungs, suited to a changing world. Each exhale carries the simple truth of survival. The air may not be as rich as before, but it is enough. Enough to sustain life, enough to shape futures. As ages unfolded, the Earth experienced great fluctuations in oxygen, like a breath that sometimes deepens, sometimes shallows. At certain times, oxygen rose again, feeding bursts of diversity and expansion. At other times, it dropped sharply, coinciding with mass extinctions that reset the stage for new beginnings. These rises and falls were not random, they were tied to the pulse of geology, to volcanic eruptions that poured carbon dioxide into the air, to the slow dance of continents that reshaped oceans, to the way life itself continually altered the chemistry of the atmosphere. Life and air were always in dialogue. The creatures breathed, the plants exhaled, the oceans absorbed, and the earth responded. To rest with this thought is to feel how interconnected it all truly is. Every breath you take now is part of that same dialogue, a conversation billions of years in the making, flowing softly into your lungs as you lie here tonight. During the Mesozoic era, when dinosaurs began their reign, oxygen levels were lower than they had been in the Carboniferous. And yet, the dinosaurs grew immense, their size not dependent solely on oxygen but on evolution's creativity, on ecological opportunity, on adaptations that made the most of what air was available. The great sauropods, with their long necks, stretching into treetops, breathed with a system more efficient than ours, air sacs that allowed oxygen to flow in a continuous stream, supporting their massive frames. Picture one of these gentle giants moving slowly across a plain, its steps deliberate, each one sending a soft tremor through the ground. Its neck arcs gracefully upward, mouth reaching for foliage high above. As it pulls leaves into its mouth, it exhales in a warm, steady sigh that drifts across the landscape. That breath, too, carries oxygen, molecules that will be drawn in again by other creatures, by plants, by the earth itself. Even the largest beings were participants in this eternal cycle, no greater and no lesser than the smallest insects, for all shared the same air. As the age of dinosaurs stretched on, oxygen continued to fluctuate, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. Scientists reading the record of rocks and fossils see how these changes shaped not only the size of creatures, but their distribution, their abundance, their very survival. Higher oxygen may have supported bursts of diversity, while lower oxygen may have favored those best suited to endure scarcity. You might think of oxygen as a tide, flowing in and out across the shorelines of deep time. When it rose, life surged outward, filling niches with variety and abundance. When it fell, the tide receded, leaving behind only those strong enough, or lucky enough, to withstand the thinning air. And yet the tide always returned, in some form, carrying with it new opportunities, new shapes, new ways of being alive. The end of the dinosaurs came not with oxygen's whisper, but with an asteroid's roar, a rare event that shifted everything, in a moment. Yet even then, the balance of the atmosphere played its part. Fires that followed darkened skies, plants struggled, and oxygen levels danced again in response. The world was fragile, yet resilient. From the ashes, mammals began to rise, inheritors of an altered earth, breathing air that was neither too rich nor too thin, but enough for their smaller, warmer bodies to thrive. That as mammals expanded, so too did oxygen once again influence their paths. High oxygen made running, hunting, and endurance easier. Lower oxygen in high places challenged them to adapt, to form new strategies of breath and blood. Even today, in mountain ranges where the air is thinner, people and animals live with adaptations, written into their very cells. Quiet reminders that the composition of the air continues to shape every heartbeat, every step, every dream. Oxygen is not just a number in the atmosphere, not just a percentage on a chart. It is the unseen companion of every life that has ever lived. It makes possible the warmth of a bird's wing beat, the whisper of a human sigh, the deep stillness of sleep. Without it, life falters. With it, life flourishes, grows, transforms. The history of Earth is, in many ways, the history of oxygen itself, told through leaves and lungs, through flames and fossils, through the soft rhythm of breath. As you listen, as you rest, let yourself feel that rhythm. Inhale slowly, drawing in air that connects you to all of history. Exhale gently, releasing into the stillness of night. Each breath you take is a continuation of the same cycle that once filled the lungs of dinosaurs, that once swirled through the forests of the Carboniferous. that once fueled fires and rebirth alike. And as the story unfolds, know that it is not rushing. Time in this telling is wide, gentle, expansive. It is not a march but a drift, like mist across a quiet lake, like clouds moving slowly through the evening sky. You are invited to rest within it, to let the story carry you, softly, deeper, toward stillness, toward sleep. When the dinosaurs slipped quietly into memory, it was as though the earth exhaled and allowed new voices to emerge. Among the ashes and shadows of that great ending, mammals began to rise into spaces once dominated by giants. Small at first, cautious and quick, they carried within them the ability to thrive in a changing world, breathing air that had settled into more moderate levels of oxygen. Neither the abundance of the Carboniferous nor the extremes of collapse. It was a balanced breath, and in its balance, possibility blossomed. Imagine the quiet forests of that time. The undergrowth rustles as a small mammal scurries across fallen leaves, its heart beating fast, lungs drawing steadily upon the air. Each inhale carries the promise of endurance, of warmth, of movement. Oxygen flows into blood, into cells, fueling the tiny muscles that propel it forward. It is not grand in size, but it is rich in resilience, and in this resilience lies the seed of futures yet unseen. As the ages turned, oxygen became not just the background of life but the stage upon which survival was tested. Mammals developed greater endurance than many of their predecessors, warm-blooded and steady, able to regulate their bodies even as climates shifted. Oxygen fed this warmth, this internal fire, allowing them to move under the stars, to hunt, to explore, to dream. In this way, oxygen was not simply a gas, but a quiet guardian, enabling life to expand into forms more complex, more aware, more alive to the world around them. The forests spread and shrank. Ice advanced and retreated, seas rose and fell, and through it all, oxygen levels shifted like a tide. When they dipped lower, some creatures struggled, and others adapted. When they rose again, diversity flourished. It was as though the earth itself offered challenges and gifts in equal measure, shaping life not through sudden force but through the gentle persistence of breath. As mammals diversified, some grew larger, filling niches once occupied by the great reptiles. Others remained small, darting and nimble. The balance of oxygen played its part, setting limits and opportunities, guiding the possibilities of size and speed. The great mammoths that wandered Ice Age plains drew deep breaths of crisp, oxygen-rich air, fueling muscles that carried them across vast distances. Smaller creatures nestled in burrows or perched in trees, their every heartbeat tied just as firmly to the rhythm of the atmosphere. In time, among the many shapes and faces of mammals, one lineage began to rise in awareness. They stood a little taller, gazed a little farther, dreamed a little deeper. They learned to harness fire, a dance of oxygen and flame that warmed their nights, cooked their food, and offered a circle of safety against the dark. Fire was more than survival, it was companionship, it was memory, it was the first true partnership between humankind and the invisible breath of the world. Picture the early human ancestors gathered around a fire, sparks drifting upward into the night, their faces glow with warmth, shadows flickering on cave walls. Each flame is a story told in light and oxygen, a story of how air itself could be transformed into heat and brightness. As they inhale the smoky air, as they exhale laughter or song, they are weaving themselves into a bond with the atmosphere, a bond that still holds us now. The use of fire deepened our relationship with oxygen. It became not only the element of breath, but the fuel of transformation. With fire, humans could shape tools, harden clay, later forge metal. With fire, they began to alter landscapes, clearing spaces, cooking harvests, reshaping the surface of the earth itself. Oxygen, once only the quiet enabler of life, became the partner of progress, of culture, of civilization. And still, with every inhale and exhale, the rhythm continued. Across centuries, across continents, humans adapted to different altitudes, different climates, different balances of oxygen. In high mountains, where the air was thinner, bodies learned to use oxygen more efficiently, blood rich with adaptations that carried each molecule farther. In lowlands, where the air was thicker, life moved at a different pace. Everywhere, the breath tied people to place, as intimate as heartbeat, as steady as sleep. Even as civilizations grew, as cities rose and roads stretched across the land, oxygen remained the silent constant. The great builders of stone temples, the farmers tending fields, the sailors crossing oceans, all of them lived by the generosity of the atmosphere. They may not have understood the science of oxygen, but they knew the importance of air, of breath, of wind across the fields and lungs filled with life. Over time, humanity began to study the air more carefully, to understand its invisible composition. Discoveries revealed that the atmosphere was not one thing but many: nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and more. Among these, oxygen was recognized as the vital spark, the giver of life and flame alike. This knowledge only deepened the sense of wonder, for something so ordinary, so easily taken for granted, was revealed as the very essence of being. As the modern age dawned, oxygen became central to medicine, to science, to exploration. Divers carried it beneath the sea, astronauts breathed it among the stars, hospitals used it to heal, to steady, to restore. Yet even in these extraordinary uses, the truth remained simple. Oxygen was the same ancient breath, the same invisible companion that had shaped dragonflies in the Carboniferous, dinosaurs in the Mesozoic, and humans by the firelight of early nights. Today, as you lie in rest, the air around you holds this entire history. The oxygen that flows into your lungs may once have drifted through the leaves of a Carboniferous fern, may once have circled in the breath of a mammoth, may once have danced within the flames of a human hearth. Each molecule is timeless, recycled, endlessly, carrying with it the memory of all who came before. Inhale, and you are part of this lineage. Exhale, and you return your voice to the story. It is not a story rushed, nor a story bound by urgency. It is a story as slow and steady as the turning of the earth, a story that asks nothing of you but to rest, to listen, to breathe. And as Block 3 comes to its gentle close, let yourself drift deeper into calm, knowing that oxygen's history is still unfolding, and you are already part of it, with every soft, quiet breath you take tonight. The story of oxygen is not only the story of creatures and their breath, but also of landscapes, waters, and skies. It is woven into the very fabric of Earth's climate, a quiet architect of seasons, of storms, of balance between warmth and cold. To understand oxygen is to understand the calm patience of the planet itself, turning slowly through ages, its breath in harmony with its surface and its seas. Imagine the oceans long ago, stretching vast and seemingly endless, their surfaces shimmering under the sunlight, their depths dark and secret. Oxygen did not only live in the sky, but also dissolved into these waters, feeding the lives that swam and drifted there. Each wave carried invisible threads of it downward, into the gills of fish, into the soft bodies of drifting jellyfish, into the tiny plankton that formed the base of the ocean's endless chain of nourishment. The oceans became a mirror of the atmosphere, rising and falling with oxygen's abundance. In times when the air above was rich, the waters below held more, and life flourished in colorful reefs and swarming schools. In times when oxygen dipped, the seas became quieter, emptier, vast stretches where little could thrive. This gentle, yet powerful rhythm shaped the very map of ocean life, just as it shaped the forests and plains above. On land, oxygen played its role in the dance of climate. Fires could spread more easily when the air was richer, sculpting the landscapes by clearing old growth and making way for new. Too much oxygen and fire became an ever-present risk, reshaping ecosystems again and again. Too little, and the forests grew damp and heavy, their decay slower, their renewal different. The balance was always delicate, yet always guided by the unseen hand of the atmosphere. On the long span of Earth's ages, oxygen partnered with carbon, another invisible actor. While oxygen allowed life to breathe and burn, carbon shaped the warmth of the planet, capturing sunlight and holding it close. Together, these two elements became the twin storytellers of climate, one feeding life directly, the other shaping the conditions under which that life could thrive. In this partnership, entire epochs rose and fell, entire worlds of creatures blossomed and faded. Picture a forest during one of Earth's warmer, oxygen-rich periods. The air is heavy with fragrance, leaves wide and green, trunks stretching high. Into the sky, insects buzz in thick clouds, birds dart among the branches, mammals climb and leap, all drawing upon the abundance that fills their lungs with every breath. Streams flow clear and bright, their waters sparkling with oxygen, carrying it to fish that flash silver in the shallows. It is a world alive in every corner, every shadow, every heartbeat. Then, imagine a colder time, when glaciers pressed their weight across the continents, and oxygen levels dipped lower. The forests shrink, grasslands spread, animals gather in herds across the open plains. The air is thinner, every breath more precious, every movement a little slower. Life adapts, reshapes itself, finds new ways to endure. Oxygen is still there, still the quiet companion, but it whispers rather than sings, asking creatures to be careful, to be deliberate, to listen more closely to the rhythm of survival. Through these cycles, oxygen became a sculptor of possibility. It decided how large wings could grow, how fast hearts could beat, how high mountains could be climbed, how deep oceans could be explored. Creatures did not always know this, but they lived within its limits, their entire existence framed by the gift and constraint of each breath. As humans grew more aware, they began to notice patterns in the sky and water, in the rise and fall of seasons. They saw how winds carried life-giving air across the land, how storms churned the seas, how fire cleared the fields. They might not have spoken of oxygen by name, but they felt its presence in every wind, every flame, every breath of morning air. The poets of old sang of the breath of gods, the spirit of wind, the sigh of earth itself, full echoes of the invisible force that we now understand as oxygen. Even in the quiet moments of daily life, oxygen shaped experience. The crisp air of winter carried a different clarity than the heavy warmth of summer. The sea breeze felt different from the mountain gust, though both carried the same essential gift. In sacred rituals, in songs, in meditation, breath was recognized as life, as connection, as something beyond the ordinary. This intuition was not wrong. It was a recognition of the same truth that science later confirmed, that within the act of breathing lies the essence of existence. As centuries passed and humanity stepped into the age of science, the role of oxygen in climate and balance became clearer. It was measured, analyzed, charted, its presence linked not only to life itself but to the health of the planet. Forests were understood as lungs of the earth, oceans as reservoirs of breath, each tree and wave part of the endless cycle. It was a revelation that deepened respect, though not always accompanied by care. In the modern age, we have begun to see that the balance of oxygen, once taken for granted, is fragile. The burning of forests, the warming of oceans, the shifts in climate all affect the delicate exchange that has sustained life for billions of years. Though oxygen itself remains abundant, the systems that renew it are vulnerable. The trees that exhale it, the plankton that release it, the cycles that maintain it all, are living systems. And like all life, they depend on balance. But tonight, as you listen, there is no urgency in this story. The earth continues to breathe, as it has for ages beyond counting. The forests still whisper, the seas still carry their secret tides, the winds still drift across mountains and plains. Oxygen still flows into your lungs as you rest, still nourishes your cells, still ties you to every age that came before. The quiet rhythm remains, steady and true, inviting you to trust in its persistence. You might imagine yourself standing in a meadow, the air around you soft and cool, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Each breath feels easy, natural, effortless, as though the world itself is breathing with you. In that moment, you are not separate from the earth's story of oxygen. You are part of it, as natural and timeless as the grass beneath your feet and the sky above your head. And as this block draws to its close, you can feel the continuity of it all. Oxygen was here long before us, shaping worlds and creatures, guiding the tides of history. It is here now, in every breath you take, and it will remain long after, carrying the story forward. All you need to do is rest within it, to breathe softly, to let the slow rhythm of life hold you. To look forward into the quiet mystery of what lies ahead, we must first remember the patience of oxygen. It has never hurried. It has flowed like a river through time, steady, unseen, but always shaping. Just as it carved the forms of ancient forests and gave rise to creatures of wings and breath, so too will it shape the story that is still unfolding. What lies ahead for oxygen is also what lies ahead for life itself. For every breath is both inheritance and promise. Imagine, then, Earth as it continues its journey through ages yet to come. The continents drift slowly, mountains rise and fall, oceans deepen and retreat, and through it all, oxygen moves with them. The atmosphere we know today is not fixed. It is alive, shifting with the seasons of geology, with the long rhythms of Earth's turning. In distant ages, perhaps millions of years from now, oxygen levels may once again change, rising or falling in response to the quiet engines of volcanoes, the endless growth of plants, the chemistry of seas. If oxygen were to rise once more, even a little, the world would feel different. Insects could grow larger, wings stretching wide, their hum filling the forests like ancient echoes. Fires would burn more easily, their glow shaping landscapes, opening spaces, clearing pathways for new growth. Breathing would feel deeper, fuller, every step lighter. Life might expand into new forms, finding possibilities that today are just whispers in the genes of creatures. If oxygen were to fall, the world would grow quieter, more subdued. Forests would shrink, fires would dim, and animals would adapt with slower movements, gentler rhythms. Perhaps humans, too, would learn to breathe differently, hearts adjusting, bodies reshaping in subtle ways. It would be a slower world, not lesser, but quieter, asking more patience, more care, more stillness. The balance of oxygen is delicate, yet also resilient. It has endured ice ages and warm ages, extinctions and blooms of life. It is a reminder that Earth is never static, but always in conversation with itself, always breathing, always listening. The cycles that sustain oxygen, forests, oceans, tiny drifting plankton are all parts of this great whispering dialogue. Each leaf, each wave, each gust of wind is a syllable in the endless story of the planet's breath. Looking outward beyond Earth, scientists wonder what oxygen might mean for other worlds. When telescopes gaze into the darkness of space, searching for planets circling distant suns, they look for signs of air like ours. Oxygen in an atmosphere might mean life, or the possibility of it. It is like a beacon, a soft glow in the spectrum of light, hinting that somewhere far away, perhaps another world is also breathing. You can imagine a planet turning slowly in its orbit, its skies tinted differently from ours, perhaps pale green or golden. On its surface, oceans shimmer, clouds drift, and somewhere life stirs. If oxygen is there, then perhaps something is also breathing, some creature inhaling and exhaling, just as we do, though in a form we cannot imagine. It is humbling to think that the same invisible gift that sustains us might be scattered across the stars, nurturing lives as quiet and precious as our own. Oxygen thus becomes not only the story of Earth, but the story of possibility. It is a language of connection, a way of recognizing kinship across space and time. To breathe is to join in that language, to be part of a chorus that may extend far beyond the boundaries of this single world. In this way, each breath you take at night is not only a part of your life, but a thread in a tapestry that stretches across the cosmos. Returning to Earth, we see how humans now carry both the gift and the responsibility of oxygen. We know more than ever before how it moves, how it is renewed, how it can be harmed. We understand that forests are more than trees, they are breath itself. Oceans are more than water, they are lungs hidden beneath waves. The smallest creatures, plankton drifting invisibly in sunlight, are part of the great machinery that allows us to rest, to dream, to be. And so, in caring for Earth, we are caring for our own breath, for the rhythm of sleep, for the life that flows quietly from moment to moment. It is not a burden but an invitation, a reminder that we are part of the same cycle, inseparable from the forests, the seas, the skies. We do not stand outside of oxygen's story, we live inside it, as much a part of it as the trees that sway, or the fish that swim. You might picture yourself now lying in a meadow at twilight, the sky painted in soft hues of fading light. The air is cool, gentle, filled with the fragrance of grass and earth. Each breath you take feels as though it has traveled through leaves and clouds, through ancient forests and oceans, before finding its way to you. You are not separate from the world around you. You are held within it, gently, completely, eternally. As the night deepens, the stars appear, distant and calm, scattered across the sky like sparks of memory. Each one might host a world, and each world might hold its own breath. You are part of this vast, breathing universe, part of the same endless rhythm. The oxygen you draw into your lungs has been part of countless lives before you, and will be part of countless lives after. You are not alone. You are connected, through every breath, to everything that is, everything that was, everything that will be. This is the quiet gift of oxygen, the invisible thread that ties us to the earth, and beyond, it asks nothing but awareness, nothing but gratitude, nothing but rest. And as you listen now, drifting further into calm, you can let go of thought, let go of time, and simply breathe. Each inhale is the earth's gift to you. Each exhale your gift back to the earth. In this exchange, there is balance, there is peace, there is eternity. And so, as we reach the final turn of this long and winding path, we can pause and reflect on the story we have been following. It began in shadows, in a world where oxygen was scarce, where life was fragile and hidden. We traced its rise, slow and patient, across oceans filled with unseen beings, across lands where forests once towered to impossible heights, across skies where wings beat in air richer than our own. We followed its journey through fire and flood, through extinctions and renewals, through the endless rhythm of change that defines the earth. And now, here, we arrive in the present moment, breathing softly, aware of the invisible gift that flows through us even now. Oxygen has always been a companion, though unseen. It has never demanded notice, never sought recognition, yet it has been the silent stage upon which every life unfolds. It has carried songs in the air, whispers of wind through trees, the laughter of children, the voices of ancestors. It has nourished every heartbeat, every thought, every dream. In all of history, there has not been a single story lived without its presence. To acknowledge this is to remember that life is not solitary, but woven into a greater whole, delicate and vast. Imagine, for a moment, the countless breaths taken since life began on this planet. Each one a brief spark, a moment of existence, a rhythm repeating across billions of years. The air that fills your lungs tonight is ancient, older than mountains, older than rivers. It has circled the world many times, drifting from leaf to leaf, from wave to wave, from one living being to another. It is a shared inheritance, and with every breath you take, you join in the same rhythm that has sustained Earth since the beginning. If you listen carefully, you may almost hear it, not in sound, but in feeling. The quiet inhale, the gentle release, like waves on a distant shore. It is the same pattern you find in the beating of your heart, in the rising and setting of the sun, in the shifting of seasons, in the endless orbit of the earth. Oxygen is not separate from these rhythms, it is part of them, a thread in the same fabric of time. The story of oxygen is also the story of transformation. It reminds us that what seems small can become vast, what seems fragile can endure, and what seems invisible can hold the greatest power. It was once only a trace in the air, yet it became the force that shaped forests, filled oceans with creatures, lifted wings into flight. In this way, it teaches patience and the beauty of quiet change. As we drift deeper into stillness, we can also see how oxygen connects us to what lies beyond Earth. The stars above, distant and silent, are suns like our own. Around some of them, planets turn, perhaps with air of their own, perhaps with beings who breathe as we do. We cannot know for certain, but we can dream. And in that dream, we find comfort, for oxygen becomes not only a gift of Earth, but a symbol of connection across the cosmos. Now, as the story draws gently to a close, you can allow yourself to rest in this awareness. You are part of a lineage of breath that began before you were born and will continue long after. You are part of a world that breathes with you, not apart from you. Every leaf, every cloud, every ripple of water shares in this exchange, this quiet partnership of life. There is no separation, no distance, only continuity, only belonging. Picture yourself lying under a canopy of trees at night. The leaves move softly above you, stirred by a breeze that has traveled far. The stars glimmer faintly through the branches, steady and calm. You breathe in, and the trees breathe out. You breathe out, and the trees breathe in. There is balance. There is harmony. You are safe within this cycle, supported by it, gently carried by it. As your mind grows lighter, you can let go of the need to follow each word. The story will continue within you even as you sleep. The rhythm of your breathing carries it forward, softly and endlessly. Oxygen does not stop, nor does life, nor does the quiet unfolding of time. You are free to rest, to surrender, to stillness, knowing that you are held within something greater, something eternal. The forests of that ancient world whispered with a density of life almost unimaginable to us today. Each breath of air carried not only the promise of survival, but the very energy that allowed bodies to swell, wings to grow vast, and muscles to thrum with quiet strength. It was a world in which oxygen itself was a sculptor, shaping life's form and rhythm with invisible hands, weaving strength into tissues and resilience into bones. When we wander back in thought to those primeval swamps and sprawling woodlands, we can almost feel the weight of that atmosphere, the richness that pressed gently against the skin of every living thing. Insects, with their delicate but mighty forms, seemed to have grown beyond the scale of imagination. Dragonflies, vast as eagles, drifted through the dim green air, their wings shimmering like glass under the dappled sunlight. The rustle of their flight was not the faint whisper we know today, but a firm, resonant hum, the sound of nature breathing at a larger scale. Each flap carried them across distances effortlessly, as if the sky itself offered a softer resistance, granting them command over the air. They were hunters, but they were also symbols of the generosity of oxygen, thriving in a balance where the air filled their hollow bodies with vitality. Beneath them, the forest floor was a kingdom of shadows and towering plants. Ancient trees, their trunks thick with age and layered in moss, reached high into the mist, creating a canopy that filtered sunlight into soft beams. Between the trunks, ferns spread in carpets of feathery green, their fronds arching with grace, while horsetails rose like slender spires, catching droplets of dew that gleamed like crystal in the pale light. Every inch of this land was alive, nourished by air and water, woven together into a pattern of growth that seemed eternal. In this atmosphere of abundance, even the small creatures seemed larger than life. Millipedes, armored and ancient, stretched, longer than a human, winding slowly through the undergrowth, their many legs moving in rippling unison. Beetles clicked and hummed with shells that gleamed like polished stone, their bodies carrying patterns as if carved by time. The air buzzed, hummed, and thrummed, with voices that were deeper, fuller, almost musical in their harmony. The pulse of life was strong, steady, and wrapped in the quiet embrace of oxygen's invisible abundance. Yet, for all its gifts, the air carried with it a delicate tension. The higher oxygen made fire an ever-present companion, a quiet danger that lay waiting in the heart of the forest. A single spark, born from a lightning strike or the friction of falling rock, could leap into flame that grew with frightening swiftness. Fires burned hotter and spread faster in that atmosphere, and while life flourished in the calm, it also danced on the edge of flame's embrace. Forests would ignite, sweeping across the land in waves of heat, leaving behind blackened trunks and ashen soil. But even in destruction, the oxygen-fed flames carved a role in the balance of life, clearing ground for new growth, feeding the cycle of renewal. As creatures moved through this world, their very bodies reflected the push and pull of power. Muscles worked with a strength beyond the limits of low-oxygen worlds. Circulatory systems carried vitality with an efficiency that made size possible. And lungs, or even simple air sacs, drew in breath after breath of richness. Creatures did not know why their bodies swelled, why their wings held them so easily aloft. They only lived, moved, and grew, carried by the unseen current of their atmosphere. Time passed slowly in those ages, measured not in hours but in the steady unfolding of life. Forests expanded, rivers carved their paths, and creatures adapted, always shaped by the invisible atmosphere. Evolution seemed to favor grandeur in that era, stretching the boundaries of form and possibility. The insects grew, the amphibians swelled, and the plants reached higher, all under the quiet influence of a world thick with oxygen. The amphibians, in particular, began to write their story in this air. They crawled from water to land, their bodies testing the firmness of soil, their lungs tasting the abundance of air. Some returned to the safety of pools, while others pressed forward, their forms lengthening, their limbs growing sturdier. The oxygen-rich world welcomed them, fueling their bodies, granting them resilience as they ventured further from water's edge. They were the pioneers of a new life, the bridge between water and forest, carrying the breath of both realms within them. And in their shadows, predators evolved as well. Insects grew sharper mandibles, amphibians grew wider jaws, and each creature, in its own way, adapted to hunt or to flee. The oxygen was not only a gift but a challenge, for in granting strength to one creature, it granted strength to its rivals as well. Balance was maintained not by stillness, but by the constant rhythm of life. Predator and prey, shaping one another in the endless dance of survival. Through the ages, the atmosphere ebbed and flowed. Oxygen levels did not remain constant, but rose and fell like a tide, sculpting the fortunes of those who depended on it. When the air was rich, life swelled with size and strength. When it thinned, the giants diminished, and new forms took their place. The story of Earth was always written. In the air, in the invisible mixture that every creature breathed, it was a story of adaptation, of resilience, of the eternal interplay between abundance and scarcity. In the great forests of that oxygen-rich age, silence was rare. The chorus of life echoed through every layer, from the ground to the canopy. The click of beetles, the hiss of insects, the croak of amphibians, and the steady sigh of the wind through ferns created a lullaby of existence. For those who walked in that world, the air was not only a necessity, but a constant companion, filling their lungs, their cells, their very being with the rhythm of survival. Oxygen was life, and life was vast. The balance was fragile, though, and with each passing era, the earth reminded its creatures of the impermanence of abundance. Fires consumed, storms swept, and oceans rose and fell. But through it all, the oxygen-rich world nurtured its forests, its insects, its great creeping and crawling forms, weaving their stories into the fabric of time. And so, as we breathe gently, in our present, we can imagine those ancient forests, the heavy air pressing softly against the skin, the chorus of giant insects humming through the leaves, the distant crackle of fire reminding all of life's precarious balance. In that atmosphere, life was not small or modest, it was bold, expansive, and thriving, carried on the invisible wings of oxygen. The forests lingered endlessly, a green ocean stretching across valleys and rising up into misty hills, their crowns swaying gently in the winds that carried a fragrance of resin and damp soil. In this air, enriched with oxygen, the smell of life was stronger, the scents carried farther, and every breath held the sweetness of thriving growth. The earth seemed fuller, almost overflowing with vitality, as though the planet itself exhaled energy into the lungs of its creatures. Imagine walking beneath those trees. Though no human footsteps yet disturbed the earth, the ground would feel soft, damp with layers of fallen leaves and the tangled weave of roots. Above, towering trunks soared higher than the eye could follow, their crowns blotting out much of the sky. The sunlight filtered down only in fragments, shimmering in shifting patterns upon the undergrowth. In that dimness, the air itself seemed thicker, as though you could almost see it dense, golden when the light struck it just right, carrying motes of dust and spores that drifted lazily, waiting for the gentle currents to guide them. In such an atmosphere, the creatures had learned to become masters of the space they inhabited. Dragonflies with wingspans broader than a man's arm glided slowly above the ferns, each flick of their wings amplified by the richness of the oxygen that surged through their trachea. They hovered like living kites, turning their faceted eyes upon the world below with quiet hunger. When they dived, the air seemed to yield to them, offering no resistance, as though granting permission for their grandeur. They were hunters, but in this abundance, even hunting carried a strange kind of grace. Other insects crawled across the forest floor, millipedes as long as logs, winding their segmented bodies with endless patience, each leg moving in careful rhythm. Their armor gleamed when caught by a shaft of sun, glistening with dew or rain that clung like tiny gems. They fed upon the decaying matter of the forest, recycling life into life. Their slow movement, a contrast to the swift wings above. Beetles clattered through the leaf litter, their shells dark and polished, some gleaming with iridescent colors that caught the faintest light. They carried their world with them, armored against the unknown, thriving under the gentle rain of air. But the gift of oxygen was not only in size, it was in endurance, in energy, in the ability of every creature to persist a little longer, to climb a little higher, to stretch beyond the limits of what would otherwise be possible. Frogs of that time, their bodies larger, their limbs stronger, leaped from water to land with greater ease, their lungs swelling with each breath of richness. Reptiles began to crawl farther inland, testing the boundaries of this new abundance, and the forests echoed with the sounds of their tentative steps. Each new venture was a story, written quietly in the stillness of oxygen's embrace. Yet, as with all things, abundance carried its shadow. Fires, born of storms and the strike of lightning upon dry bark, became infernos in this atmosphere. Flames grew higher, faster, and hotter, racing across the canopy like waves across the sea. Insects that once hummed peacefully were caught in sudden storms of fire, their wings curling in the heat, their songs silenced in an instant. Trees, proud and ancient, crackled and fell, consumed by the breath of flame. The forest was no stranger to these trials, for in the very abundance of air, fire found its greatest ally. Still, out of ash came renewal. Seeds buried in the soil were awakened by the heat, their shells cracked open by fire's kiss, new ferns unfurled, and saplings reached eagerly upward. Life seemed tireless, resilient in the face of destruction, as though the earth itself understood the necessity of balance. The forests were reborn again and again, each time different, each time stronger, in an eternal cycle that oxygen both enabled and threatened. The giant insects thrived most during these high oxygen ages, but they also became bound to its limits. For as levels shifted, as tides of air rose and fell with geological rhythms, so too did their dominance. When oxygen fell, their bodies could no longer support their grandeur, and slowly, the age of giants waned. Evolution adjusted its brush, painting smaller forms, more efficient lungs, and new strategies for life. But during those peaks, when the air was thick and sweet, they ruled the skies and the ground, a living testament to the generosity of oxygen. Amid these forests, the soundscape would have been mesmerizing. A constant low chorus of buzzing, chirping, croaking, and crackling filled the air. The hum of wings overhead mixed with the creak of trees swaying in the wind. The gentle drip of water from the canopy, falling into hidden pools, joined the chorus. It was a lullaby of life, layered and endless, carrying both vitality and tranquility. If one closed their eyes and listened, it would seem as though the forest itself was breathing, each sound a note in the larger song of oxygen and time. The creatures did not know that they were shaped by the air they breathed. They did not wonder why their wings grew longer, or their bodies heavier, nor did they question why fire came more swiftly to the land. They only lived, moved, and adapted, as though guided by an unseen hand. The atmosphere was their stage, their sustenance, and their sculptor, writing their forms and their fates with each passing era. The earth itself seemed aware of the balance, shifting the scales back and forth across ages. When oxygen soared, forests grew thick, and creatures swelled. When it fell, new forms emerged, leaner, smaller, more resilient in different ways. Each fluctuation shaped the course of evolution, not with sudden violence, but with the slow persistence of time. Life endured, adjusted, and pressed forward, never ceasing, always changing, always breathing. As we linger in thought on that world, it is easy to see it, not as alien, but as a reflection of the same cycles we witness today. Fire and regrowth, abundance and scarcity, predator and prey. These patterns were ancient, long before our own species ever arrived. They were written into the fabric of Earth's story, carried by the breath of oxygen, flowing from one age to the next. And in the deep stillness of night, when we close our eyes and imagine that distant past, it becomes almost dreamlike. We can hear the rustle of vast wings drifting overhead. We can sense the cool dampness of moss beneath our feet. We can almost taste the heavy air, rich and sweet, filling our lungs. It is a memory we do not own, yet one that whispers in our imagination, a connection to the long river of life that flowed before us. Oxygen gave life its grandeur, but it also reminded life of humility, for with abundance came fragility, and with strength came risk. The forest knew this, the insects knew this, even the creeping amphibians knew this in their silent, instinctive way, and yet they lived on, filling the world with movement, sound, and growth. The earth, in its quiet wisdom, carried them forward, weaving their story into the endless unfolding of time. So the world breathed, and life breathed with it, each inhale and exhale a chapter in the story of balance, each moment a reminder that even the invisible air could shape the destiny of all who walked, crawled, swam, or flew upon this ancient earth. The forests did not remain unchanged forever. As the earth shifted through its ages, the balance of oxygen that once fed such vast abundance began to change. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the invisible breath of the planet altered. The air that had once been so dense, so rich with life-giving energy, began to thin. Not suddenly, not violently, but in the gradual rhythm of geological time. So slow that no single creature could ever sense it, yet steady enough to reshape the course. of evolution. The giant insects that had ruled the skies began to feel the limits of their own grandeur. Their vast bodies, once supported by the richness of air, became burdensome. Wings that once carried them with effortless strength grew heavy, their flight shorter, their endurance diminished. The air no longer flowed as freely through their trachea, and the very design that once gave them mastery became their quiet undoing. Slowly, their reign faded. The dragonflies grew smaller, the millipedes shortened, the beetles, though still resilient, lost the colossal size that had once defined their world. It was not a fall from grace, but rather a gentle retreat, as though nature herself whispered to them that their time had passed. They did not vanish, for insects are among the most enduring of Earth's children, but they adjusted, they shrank, and they yielded the skies and the forests to new forms of life that were waiting patiently in the shadows. For as the insects waned, the reptiles began to rise. They had been there all along, quiet, cautious, lingering at the edges of ecosystems, breathing both air and possibility. Now, with the thinning oxygen, they found an advantage. Unlike insects, reptiles carried lungs that pulled air more deeply into their bodies. Their breathing did not depend on the simple diffusion of gases through narrow tubes. They could draw breath, hold it, and release it in a rhythm that gave them endurance in this changing world. In the warm swamps and along the forest edges, small reptilian forms crept among the ferns, their limbs pressed firmly against the earth, their scales glistening with moisture and sunlight. Their movements were measured, deliberate, testing the air in the soil as they sought food, safety, and space. Each breath was a promise of what was to come, for within their lungs lay the blueprint of creatures that would one day dominate the land. Amphibians still lingered, their smooth skins bound to the waters, their voices echoing across wetlands. But even they began to feel the change, for the thinning oxygen made their reliance on moist-breathing skin less efficient. They remained abundant, but reptiles carried within them the future resilience that would allow them to walk farther, breathe deeper, and explore the landscapes that stretched beyond the swamps. The earth itself seemed to favor these shifts. The forests changed, their makeup adjusting to the cycles of oxygen. New plants rose, bearing seeds instead of spores, better adapted to drier conditions. The canopy grew different, offering new shelters, new shadows, and new opportunities. Fires still swept through, but now the landscapes they burned were not the same endless wet forests of before. Instead, more open spaces appeared, patches of land where reptiles could bask in the warmth of the sun, soaking its energy into their cold-blooded bodies. Insects, though diminished in size, remained vital. They pollinated, they recycled, they fed upon plants and upon each other. They adapted in ways that allowed them to continue thriving in their smaller forms. The buzzing of wings never ceased, though the giants no longer filled the skies. Instead, a more delicate chorus persisted, quieter, more intricate, woven into the new balance of the world. The harmony of life adjusted once more. Oxygen, the unseen sculptor, had redrawn the boundaries of possibility. Where once it had lifted creatures into grandeur, now it had humbled them, reminding all of life that nothing remains unchanged forever. In its place, new strengths emerged, new strategies of survival, new shapes upon the canvas of evolution. In this changing world, the first shadows of what would become the age of reptiles stretched long across the land. Small though they were, they carried within them the potential of the great lizards, the dinosaurs, who would one day stride across continents with power and grace. The thinning of oxygen had closed one chapter, but had opened the door to another, just as rich, just as full of wonder, and just as deeply tied to the breath of the earth. And yet, in the quiet of the forests, the story remained soothingly the same. Lives still whispered in the wind, streams still trickled over stone, the air still shimmered with warmth in the light of the sun. Creatures still moved, lived, and breathed, each one a part of the endless cycle. Even as change unfolded, there was no chaos, no sudden end, only the gentle flow of time, carrying life forward into new forms. When we imagine those days, we see the shift not as loss, but as transformation. The giants of the air and earth faded, but new creatures found their place. The world was never empty, never silent, but always filled with breath, always filled with life. Oxygen continued its quiet work, unseen yet powerful, weaving its influence through every wing, every scale, every leaf, and every lung. And so, the earth continued to breathe, and life continued to follow, never stopping, never breaking, but always flowing onward, as soft and steady as a lullaby sung across the ages. As the long ages unfolded, the world continued its gentle rhythm of change. Oxygen, the unseen breath of the earth, never ceased its quiet shaping of life. Sometimes it swelled, gifting abundance and strength. Sometimes it lessened, guiding the path of creatures toward new forms, smaller frames, and different possibilities. Yet always it was there, surrounding every leaf, every creature, every stirring of the wind. The forests shifted as time rolled on. Where once endless swamps stretched in shadowed canopies, new plants with stronger seeds began to spread. They grew taller, sturdier, more resilient to the fires that sometimes passed through. The insects, though no longer giants, wove themselves delicately into this new world. Their buzzing continued, a quieter music than before, but one that still carried life forward, feeding reptiles, pollinating plants, and recycling the endless remains of each generation. Reptiles, now breathing deeply in this thinner air, moved confidently across the land. They found warmth in the sun, shelter in the new forests, and strength in their lungs. What had been a challenge for some was a gift for them, and slowly their kind spread farther, filling spaces that others could no longer hold. They grew in variety, some small and nimble, others larger and more enduring, each step a quiet prelude to the greater forms that would one day rise from their lineage. The great insects of the Carboniferous lived on only as memories written in stone. Their wings, once wide enough to shadow the forest floor, became faint impressions in the rocks. Their towering millipedes, once stretching longer than a man, faded from the living world. Yet their echoes remained, not as loss, but as chapters in the story of life. A reminder of what abundance can create and what balance must eventually reshape. The air itself continued its soft work, a painter with invisible strokes, crafting the conditions for every future moment. In time, new eras would come, filled with creatures beyond imagination, giant reptiles, birds that filled the skies with their calls, mammals that crept and later ran, and humans who would one day look back and wonder how it all began. But even they, in their curiosity, would still breathe the same invisible gift, the same oxygen that had carried all of life through eons of transformation. And so the story returns to stillness, a world of quiet breath, of endless cycles, of life rising, falling, and rising again. The forests whisper in the wind, rivers flow with unbroken patience, and the air moves gently through every living being, tying them all together in an eternal bond. Oxygen has never spoken, yet it has always told the same tale, a story of connection, of survival, of change that is never abrupt, but always part of a larger, soothing rhythm. If one listens closely, with the heart and not only the ear, one can almost hear the earth breathing with us, slow, steady, calm. A breath taken millions of years ago still echoes in the leaves today. The sigh of a dragonfly's wings still lingers in the air. The quiet rise of reptiles still hums in the warmth of the sun, and in each inhale we take, we share in that same ancient story, as though the earth herself cradles us in her steady arms. The giants have come and gone, the forests have shifted, and the balance has always found its way. Yet the song of life continues, soft and unbroken. It flows onward, past memory, past time, into the quiet comfort of eternity. And as this story closes, you may let it drift within you like a gentle breath. The world will keep turning, the forests will keep swaying, the air will keep flowing, through all things, and in that endless continuity, there is rest, there is peace. There is calm, for the earth itself is a lullaby, and tonight it sings softly for you.